And ladies and gentlemen, the next session that we are preparing for is the Keynote Dialogue. Allow me to share a little as we are getting ready. The Future of Supply Chains is the title, Rethinking Disruption, Resilience and Digitalisation. And since we have time, let's have a look at our pigeonhole.at slide and allow everyone to be ready by scanning the QR code. Can we have the pigeonhole slide on screen? You may scan the QR code and you can enter the event code, which is SMW2022. If you want to have a look at the code, if you can't see it from the front, you can see it from the two screens at the side, SMW2022. So this will allow you to post questions to the panel. That will be happening very soon. And allow me to share some announcements. The conference sessions are live streamed on virtual platform Swapcard, and you can also view the online sessions live in this ballroom as well. And there are over 1,300 participants on the online platform, and you can engage them via the networking tab. So this is an excellent way to network internationally, as our audience, the 1,300 of them, can be from anywhere around the world. And we'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, our lead sponsor, Fortinet, silver sponsors, Huawei, Lloyd's Register, Rena, Wärtsilä, as well as our bronze sponsors as well, ShipFix, Stormgeo, Yinson Green Technologies, and all sponsors and exhibitors. And without further ado, allow me to introduce our panel who will be joining us. Let's give them a warm welcome as we introduce them. First and foremost, let's welcome our moderator. Our moderator is Ms. Quah Hoon, Chief Executive, Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Welcome, Ms. Quah. Oh, yes. Joining Ms. Quah on the panel are, first and foremost, Mr. Tan Chong Meng, Group Chief Executive Officer, PSA International. Welcome, sir. Let's welcome Mr. Laurent Olmeta, APAC Chief Executive Officer, CMA CGM. Let's welcome our next panelist, Mr. Allard, Castelein, President and CEO, Port of Rotterdam. Welcome. And last but not least, joining us is Mr. Andre Simha, Chief Digital and Information Officer, Mediterranean Shipping Company, MSC. Welcome. Dear panelists, you may remove your mask for the panel session. Yes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to welcome our panel, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I was told I only have 40 minutes, and I look at this panel of distinguished panelists. I probably can spend just 10 minutes to describe each one of them with their vast experience. But in view of the shortage of time and only 40 minutes that we have, I'm going to just launch straight. But quick introduction, Chong Meng, we know, Group CEO of PSA International, well-known figure in Singapore. PSA has a global network of more than 60 deep sea, rail and inland terminals in 26 countries, as well as the type of business you have gone into, distripark, warehouses, and marine services, really logistics and global supply chain. PSA Group handles 1 in 10 global container movements annually. Chong Meng, he himself is also Governor Chair for the World Economic Forum's Supply Chain Transport Industry Committee. Now, Laurent Olmeta, Asia Pacific Limited CEO, CMA CGM, joined the company since 2004. You have 18 years of shipping and logistics experience, albeit coming from finance background. He has headed various leadership roles in Brazil, France, and United States, covering finance, global business services, trade, and business development. He also heads the digital transformation for Siva Logistics, a subsidiary of the group. Allard, my counterpart from Rotterdam, CEO of Port of Rotterdam since 2014. Now we know Port of Rotterdam is the largest port in Europe with a turnover of approximately euro 770 million. Now, as an authority, we know Allard has done a lot in the company and authority to strengthen the competitive position of the port. When I first came on board, I was told that's the first port I need to visit in the world. Andre Simha, Chief Digital and Information Officer of MSC, but also the chairperson of the Supervisory Board of the Digital Container Shipping Association. DCSA plays a very important role to drive interoperability in the industry through standardization. He's also a member of the Smart Maritime Network Council. So we have with us here a very distinguished panel, and we've heard earlier from our two speakers, our Senior Minister of State who talks about the need for innovation and partnership, and from Ruma, who has given us some suggestion in terms of reimagining global supply chain. Now let me start with a macro question, since all of you have so much experience in supply chain. As a shipping line, we in the sector, this global supply chain has never been such a big buzzword. We have not heard of this word as much, and so much visibility to the maritime and shipping sector. And we see a lot more interdependence now, fragility as well in the maritime supply chain in view of some of the developments we saw in the past 2 years. So maybe I'll just throw the question first to Andrew and Laurent. As shipping lines, maybe I would like to hear from you some of the shifts that you see in the global supply chain that we've not seen before, and how do you think it will perceive in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, very good. So I think that we see a number of shifts happening in our industry. So first, I think that we have seen some diversification. I mean, a lot of our customers have rethink their supply chain about the last 2 years, and we have seen that some of our customers, a lot of our customers have gone to a multi-sourcing kind of approach, both at origin and at destination. We have seen as well an increased need of speaking about sustainability. Sustainability has become a key trend, and we speak a lot with our customers on sustainability, and actually we are taking some concrete action on our side to address sustainability. Also, on the digitalization part, we have seen that visibility, and we have addressed it in the previous speech, but visibility has become extremely important. I mean, with the disruption that we have seen in all the ports around the world, the customer wanted to have a better visibility, and I think that it has a company like Project 44 have greatly helped, and I think that it will continue post the pandemic. And e-commerce as well has been a real disruptor and has changed the way we procure and the speed to market. And the last one that I think that we have seen is with the disruption, we have seen an increased need of regionalization. And so it's something that we have seen in Europe and in the US to a certain extent, and that we might see as well happening with a trade agreement that are happening in intra-Asia, so we might see more regionalization moving forward. So that's the key trend that we have seen in the past 2 years.
Andre, do you think that's the same trends that you are seeing, or?
Now, to be honest, the audio is very strange because we hear about five different sources with a bit of a delay. So I hope you can hear me. I think that, and the lady who was presenting early on mentioned that we've seen this sort of 3-year advance in digitalization that we weren't expecting it. And I think what we saw, apart from what Laurent was saying very rightly, is that there's been really a move towards more self-service, more e-business, expectations of being able to do more things online 24/7. Of course, with the pandemic, documents were stuck, people couldn't move and go to our agencies and offices and get the work done. So I think this is what's really changed. Of course, we've seen also working from home, which has changed a lot the way people think. The fact that you don't have your printer next to you, the fact that you don't have all your colleagues, you need to work in a different way. And I think that's brought some of the, I would say, some efficiencies.
So regionalization and digitalization, yes. But what about, because of some of the crises that we've been seeing, pandemic, the Ukraine crisis that's happening, ports closures, congestion, lack of port workers. Just wanted to tap maybe Chong, Meng and Allard. What do you think? What do you foresee, the immediate concern that most shipping companies have or most consumers have, freight rate, delays in shipments of the goods. What do you foresee next 1 year, 3 to 5 years?
So I think the ports have had to deal with unprecedented disruptions in the supply chain on the back of COVID, and in Europe we had the Suez Canal challenge, and that strain on the system from a capacity perspective, ports around the world, I think we will continue to have to address that for the next couple of years. It could be on the sea side, but it's more likely to be on the land side. The capacity to deal with huge vessels, 24,000 TEU, have significant cargo movements at a peak moment in time, and then have to clear that to the hinterland is a challenge that will not go away by just adding capacity to the vessels or even adding capacity a bit to the yards. So I would expect that constraint to be there, whilst at the same time we struggle with the opportunities presented through digitization. And I think ports, interestingly enough, where the liners have solidified, if you like, partnerships across the globe over the last couple of years, the terminals have a global presence, ports collaborate, but not as intimately yet as we possibly ought to do in order to make now headway and agree on standardization, on certification, on clarity of trade lanes, on electronic bills of lading. So I see that as an opportunity, but certainly one that will be there for the next couple of years. And I suppose the final thing to add as introductory remarks is that this push for decarbonization will also have its major ramifications on ports. And in order to supply the necessary low-carbon fuels, we will have to invest in that infrastructure in order to accommodate the customer's wishes. So I see some serious constraints, but they will lead to opportunities, and we will have to work very hard in order to serve the customers to the ability that we actually have.
Well, Hoon, thank you for the invitation to be here. I have agree with Allard, a slightly different view on the short term, because I think we have been through COVID for 2 years. I think we should stop blaming COVID. Mobility in many parts of the world, in countries, are already improving. Domestic mobility is actually pretty much restored in most places. But yet, at the same time, what COVID has done is to make people evaluate what is important to them as individuals. So the worker mindset, the view on showing up for a full-time job and so on has changed somewhat, and it will take some time to normalize. So in some parts of the world, while volume has come back and is slightly above 2019 level, or in some places even higher, we've had to operate with a higher number of FTE on payroll than the volumes themselves, in some cases 10 to 20% higher, because their time at work is less. So in the short term, actually, mobility is available. We need the system, and the volume in terms of capacity of ships, capacity of containers, capacity of ports, compared to 2019 is not so far beyond that we cannot cope with it. So we really have to organize ourselves to get back to a more productive environment. At the same time, I think what COVID has caused the industry to do is to, like people evaluating what's important, is to double down on the two key things that we all talk about that we know are really key. Resilience, promoted by the very fundamental of first step, visibility. It's amazing we talk about visibility in this century. And second, sustainability, which I think you would have seen IPCC releasing their report a few days late, but a very powerful nonetheless, that comes up with the warning sign again that says, unless we peak out in 2025, and I can't see that happening, we're actually losing the plot as a world. And so the key things that we have to deal with, I fully agree with Allard, is how we can actually embrace more partnership. I think the future next step of the supply chain world will be a more integrated one. There has been horizontal integration. There are beginnings of vertical integration. But before integration shows its effects, I think partnership should be there. And then that partnership will give us greater chance to have the visibility and the intelligence, because data needs to lead to knowledge and hence intelligence, which some of the great companies are doing to provide new solutions quickly for sustainable responses. And that reimagining part, because none of us, we are all fractions of supply chain, to be very honest, fractions. For us to be able to reimagine as a whole, we need to be able to share that. And our current governance over data, over carbon mechanisms and standards and so on, actually doesn't make that easy. And we as leaders must somehow try to weigh in and imagine the future while dealing with today.
So you're right, in terms of digitalization, innovation, stop blaming COVID for where we are. In fact, you are right. I think we should thank COVID, because if not for COVID, the issue of digitalization, standardization, partnership wouldn't have come up so strongly. I want to build on the points that the four of you have sort of talked about. In the industry, we've seen MSC, PSA, and CMA CGM going vertical integration along the supply chain. That's one solution. We've also seen DCSA and also port authorities between Rotterdam, Singapore, trying to build partnerships to build a lot more horizontal sort of integration. Now, is this the global solution? You think if we go along this track, we'll be able to reach where we are? And perhaps more pertinently, within your company, having heard what our speakers have mentioned earlier, how do you think your company is able to forge more such horizontal integration and get the whole industry to build that momentum to go forward? It's a large question, but I'm just throwing it to any one of you here to answer.
I think we need both. Typically in CMA CGM, you're right that we believe that the resilience go with investment in asset, but as well in technology. So we have continued to invest deeply in 2021 in our asset, both on the terminal side, on the maritime side, where we have acquired 47 ships additional, 800,000 container additional, but also on the building on the logistics side. But we believe as well on the technology front. Typically, we are one of the founding members of the DCSA, and we believe that interoperability and standard are necessary in this industry, and that we need to share much more information, data. That's what we have seen the past 2 years, that data are key and the quality of data is extremely important. So we need standard and we need interoperability, and we need to operate as an industry and as partners. Okay.
Laurent, since you have lots of experience in US, can I ask you, will this be sufficient to solve the supply chain issue in the US, or is there more that needs to be done?
That's a deeper question than this one. I think that what we have seen in the US, it's a perfect storm, because we have seen an extremely high demand combined with the infrastructure that has reached some kind of limit. I mean, first of all, the port have done a phenomenal job, and all the workers that are in the warehouse or at the port have been our real hero, because they have been there all the time during the pandemic, and they have done a fantastic job. But obviously they have been hit by the COVID, so they were not operating at 100%. So on the longshoreman side, on the trucking side, and on the depot side, so and on the warehouse. So combined with the high demand, clearly we have reached the limit of the infrastructure. And by the way, the port and the infrastructure are not operating 24/7 in the US compared to Asia typically. So that has been another issue. And the e-commerce, the rise of e-commerce has been extremely has increased the need of manpower. So for now, the situation is improving, but without a drop in demand, that will not. There is no magic bullet. We said no. It's there will be a need of additional investment. Typically, we just took over the FMS, Phoenix Marine Terminal in Los Angeles, and we are going to invest because we need additional capacity. But yes, without a drop in the demand, I don't expect the situation to stabilize in time soon.
So we have the US piece which may not improve the next few. So Allard, you look like you want to speak about Europe as well.
Well, I'm not going to say a lot about the US, I reckon. That's maybe a bridge too far. But I wanted to come back to your question, Leung, on the partnership issue, vertical, horizontal. And I think the industry should accept that data should not be considered proprietary. It's the services you build on the data that will make the difference. Because if a liner sits on the data, if a terminal sits on the data are not made available, then ETAs, ETDs, the loading of cargo, the delivery of cargo at a terminal, or the clearance by customs cannot be shared with the general public and the sector as a whole. So I'd be very much in favor of having a full acceptance by the industry that, yes, you have your data, but you should make them available and you build your services that will become proprietary. And if we get to that modus operandi, then it becomes much more easy to predict where the cargo is, when the vessels will arrive. And that's not only from a initial seagoing terminal ports operations, it's then subsequently also the hinterland. It's the road truckers, it's the rail, it's the inland barges, it's the pipeline infrastructure that we run and operate. So I would really think that we have a collective responsibility almost to not accept sub-optimization, because sub-optimization inevitably will lead to non-sustainable business models, and also not only non-sustainable from a waste perspective, but also from a perspective of an exposure to the environment. So there is an onus upon us to ensure that we actually, as an industry, now step forward and wish to leverage the interest by the VCs and the public sectors and the private sectors and the large enterprises, and to really step up our performance and not accept the non-performance. Because it's actually quite strange that in 2022, so few vessels are on time, with due respect to the liners. This is 2022, right? If you now order a credit card as a private individual, you would expect it to be there exactly on the hour of the day that is predicted it will arrive in your mailbox. So I think the industrial movement of goods by sea trade, we should set the same standards, same expectations, and just work back what is required in order to get there.
I want to build on that, and this is our experience as well in developing this common data infrastructure called SG TradeX that Minister referred to, as well as Roma as well. You need the infrastructure, you need good set of data environments, guidelines or standards like what DCSA is trying to do. But at the same time, you need to socialize and bring on board people who possess data. And Allard, what they're describing a lot is event data, which actually doesn't run against the realm of competition in terms of trade. But there's still a lot of nervousness. And it's something that I think as industry leaders, we should try to create an environment where we can convince people that it is acceptable and it's appropriate. I don't think we're there yet. The other thing is data contribution and usage is not symmetrical. And that's one of the challenges we run against. The data provider does not perceive that the benefit of providing the data accrued to the party is actually complementary, or rather consistent with the value of the data. And then, of course, there are other technical aspects about the quality and fraud and so on. But if there could be, when we started SG TradeX, a lot of enthusiasm was about the use case. It can be done, and why not, and pain points and so on. But when you get to crunch time, it's data. It's also bringing people into the operational ecosystem who are operationally ready. And we tend to think that supply chain providers, SMEs and all, struggle to be ready. That's true. We also find that customers themselves oftentimes are not ready, because for many years, supply chain is a procurement job somewhere in the kitchen. So there's actually quite a bit of work that I think as leaders, if we're trying to create the environment, port authorities and ourselves and all, these are real, at the coalface challenges we need to address.
You know, there are many touch points in the whole global supply chain. I was told at least 18. And it's not just big companies, you have SMEs. We have collaboration at the port level. So we do EBL. We try to get as much EBDN going at the country level or global level. We have DCSA and SG TradeX trying to get the standards and data exchange going. Andrea, you are in a very important position on DCSA, and Chong Meng just explained about SG TradeX, which is an initiative we are trying to make in Singapore to make it global. Do you see potential, I mean, the question I think I ask is inclusive versus exclusive model, as well as competition versus collaboration. And these are two key, I think, dichotomy we need to overcome within the maritime industry or global supply chain. What's your view?
You've been asking a lot of very, very vast questions, I think, and I think the team here has been commenting very positively. So we're looking at the 3 T's now, since we call them that. So visibility, predictability, and sustainability. They don't start with T, but they end with T. And indeed, as you were mentioning, it's all about getting the information, agreeing to share the data, and sharing quality data, because we tend to forget that sharing data is not sufficient. We get enough complaints about, lack of visibility and predictability and tracking. So, and we all try to move towards that. I think you mentioned DCSA many times. Thank you for that. I believe that it's this is what is going to help us to create the foundations for, of course, SG TradeX, for TradeLens, for all these initiatives that are out there. And I think they're all very interesting. They're all very positive. They all have a common goal of facilitating trade, of helping people to have access to data, also helping some companies to make money, as you mentioned before, which is fine. But yeah, it's all about making sure that we share the information, we share it right, and that we find, how should I say, the right ecosystems that are going to help to make that information available to all. And I don't want to, commit to any particular solutions. I think all these solutions are valid or valuable in their own regions, as long as, I think Allard mentioned, you have the interoperability between them, so that you're not sort of locked into one of these ecosystems. I think that's key.
I want to take questions from the floor. However, I don't have access here with me. Are you able to pull it out into the screen as I continue the conversation, please? Okay. So now we talk a lot about interoperability, collaborations, and actually on the panel here, from MPA, PSA, who handles 1/7 of global cargo, CMA, CGM, one of the biggest liner, MSC as well, and Port Authority. So if I were to ask you, in the areas of talent, financing, MarineTech, what do you think we can do more together?
I think we need to work together on the talent side. I mean, obviously we are all in search of talent in this industry. I mean, and our industry is transforming. When we speak about digitalization, we're speaking as well of new skills that will emerge in the year to come. And so we need to find a way to attract talent, and we are doing it by working closely together, and we value very much the partnership that we have with MPA. We work with actually a number of universities actually around the world, and in the US, in Europe, and here in Asia as well. On our side, in order to attract talent, we have had to listen to them. I think that it was discussed earlier that I think a lot of associates have rethink the way they see their work as part of this pandemic, and having a more work-life balance and rethinking what is success. And we have adapted globally as an organization on a more hybrid model. So we have listened to what they were telling us, and even post-COVID, we'll continue to work on this hybrid model. And we need to invest in training. I mean, on the CMA side, we are opening a very large innovation and training center called Tangram, actually, that will be based in Marseille, where we want to collaborate with other parties from the industry, bring researchers, bring a partner like MPA, ports, in order to define the future of supply chain and the future skills that are needed in the maritime industry. So it's really around this pillar that we believe will be able to attract and continue to attract talent.
Yeah, indeed, Laurent, I remember that was one of the key topics we discussed on your lunch when you first flew down and touched down in Singapore. I want to look at this question from the audience, which is actually, I think, quite interesting for us to look at, SMEs and talent. The question on, which has 6 votes, SMEs make a big number of players in the whole supply chain. Now, how it's not easy for them in terms of ability to attract good talent as well. What's your advice to them? And I link it with the next question, because on digital talent, right? How do we get our fair share of digital talent? Most go fintech. I'm quite glad to hear Ruma talk about we are at about 20 2010, 2013 of fintech, a bloom in VCs coming in. How do we get our fair share of talent, and how would we advise the SMEs? Andre?
Well, I think you mentioned earlier on the I think you mentioned the US situation and the initiatives that we've seen from the FMC, from the Department of Transportation, which are all, I mean, very positive towards you know, other governments as well. And I think one of the things that I really liked is the way that they looked at data sharing and providing information to not only the big guys but also the SMEs. So I think that if we can create these ecosystems which are accessible to all, then we're moving forward in a positive way. Of course, when you have a large company, you have all the IT. You need to develop solutions and analyze the data. When you have smaller companies, it's much more complex. So again, if we can agree on a set of rules or dashboards or what have you, then I think that SMEs will be in a better position. And to answer your question on Singapore, what can we do together? I think we'll discuss that on Thursday. But what I see is definitely the fact that Singapore has been very active on the digital front. EBL, for example, was a key element during the pandemic, but of course after as well. So for sure on these kind of topics, we're always ready to collaborate, and we look forward to it.
Looking forward. Chong, Meng, and then
Yeah, can I chip in on that one? I think when we went through the COVID experience, individuals have to jump into the digital realm, and we saw an upsurge in digital uptake. And a single person is a bit like an SME. I don't have a CIO. But the beauty is that I think the applications that have reached out to us are all much more plug and play. And I think it's both ways. It depends on the problem statement. You have to get down into use case by use case. But in some cases, it is about addressing the SME and helping them to be better, to serve their customers better. But in some cases, it's also by working on the applications that they use and ensure that the applications themselves are as user-friendly as possible in linking to data infrastructures, data standards, and so on. So in the SG TradeX, some of the use cases we actually address and find it easier and more productive, constructive to address the system vendors, whether it's a warehousing management system that eventually will supply the system to the warehouse and warehouse operators. And I think this is one area where government is, our government partners are aware and aligned as well. There are different ways to skin the cat, and we're trying to find different solutions.
Yeah, if I could just also add, and I agree with what Chong Meng just said, that I think the other thing, we should avoid getting into the trap of building too many legacy systems ourselves already. In other words, I think at this juncture, the collaboration on the standardization, the certification, the trade lanes, the optimization could really make us allow us to make a quantum and a giant leap. Because if we continue on this path, then we might actually find ourselves with legacy systems that are too costly then to convert and change and adapt in 2, 3, 4 years' time. And we're fighting for talent. So the sooner, the earlier, the better, the more assertive we can bring those efforts together, the more likely we are to be successful in a relatively short term.
Fully agree. We've got 2 minutes left, so I wanted to just go around with one final question for all of you. In view of what we have discussed, what is the one action you would immediately act on after this panel, or one action that you think our guests here should act on after leaving this room?
That wasn't on the list of questions.
No, I think that we have seen that supply chain has drastically evolved and is now at the table of the COMEX in many companies. I mean that we have seen that we are playing a key role in moving goods around the world. So I strongly believe that, it was one of the topics of this forum discussion, is resilience. I really believe that we have seen that resilience has become a key element in making sure that company really think about disruption in terms of resilience and not look at only efficiency, but how to build resilience into their supply chain model and build with and work with partners that have that are really ready to commit, and in order to to avoid to be hit as badly in the next disruption, because some other will happen. That is for sure.
Let me go next. Be a bit philosophical because you're asking for the one theme or one action. COVID has disrupted us. I think going forward, we have to be prepared to disrupt ourselves. Reimagination is great. Acting on it is tough, and we must be ready to do what it takes.
Yeah, so I would say accelerate aspirational goals and achieve the unimaginable, and because it can be achieved and it should be achieved.
Collaborate, work together with common goals. I think that's simple.
Commit, act, pursue, and collaborate.
Yes.
That's 3, huh?
So thank you very much, audience, and thank you for the panel for your very insightful discussion. You know, the global supply chain, for most of us who are in it, it's just crisis, right? You see a lot of crisis going on, and news just keep coming, events just keep unfolding. And I think through today's conversation, discussion, hearing from the keynote speech, hearing from a Senior Minister of State, and hearing from Ruma, hearing from these panelists, you know, there is optimism, because I think there is a strong recognition that we need to do a lot more horizontal integration, we need to collaborate, and it's not just about talk anymore. And indeed, among the 5 of us here, we are really collaborating to bring global supply chain resilience to the next level, and as well as working with partners from other sectors. So I just want to thank all of you for listening in. Sorry, I can't answer all the questions that you have asked there in view of the time constraint. I told you we need 2 hours, if I could tell the organizers, for this panel in future. So let's put our hands together and thank our distinguished panelists for their insights.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Ms.
very much.
Quah, and our dear panelists. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite you to your seats, and do remember to replace your mask as well. Thank you.